If you're innovating, creating, or making a difference, this show is for you. Welcome to Over Coffee. I'm Dot Cannon. Here on Over Coffee, we talk with artists and innovators about the process of changing the world in terms of what they do.
I had this idea, what if there was really solid curriculums and training services that schools or nonprofits could reach out to become proficient in teaching robotics? So now the students are actually building a robot. And then once that robot is put together, they learn how to make it drive by itself. They learn about sensors. The coolest thing about True Robotics, again, is we really want that opportunity for all students to get it. There's so many programs out there that are amazing for the top 10 to 20%. The kids who are going to MIT already. What I think is unique about us is that we are trying to give everyone exposure.
Making STEM education accessible and engaging for everyone is what Worcester, Massachusetts-based startup True Robotics is all about. True Robotics has created 3 different robotics kits to empower students grades K through 8. Students get comfortable with engineering and programming by working with 3 progressively more complex robots, gradually developing their skills while having fun. And these hands-on robotics lessons are designed to showcase the real-world applications of computer science and math. Meanwhile, True Robotics packages include educator training and support all the way through, removing the more intimidating aspects of teaching students to use the technology. Anthony Galgano is the president and founder of True Robotics. Anthony, how did you first discover your passion for robotics to the point that you're making it your life's work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So believe it or not, I actually started out with robotics when I was really young. I mean, maybe 4 or 5 years old. My dad actually had a passion for robotics. He's an engineer as well. And I remember just being a young kid and he would buy robotic parts. We would build robots. He's an electrical engineer, so he was always designing stuff and building stuff, and I would always play with whatever he was working on. He did a lot of the first robotics competitions. He was a mentor, so he would always bring me to the team meetings and things like that. So ever since I was really little, I was kind of exposed to it. All through high school, I took as many engineering classes as I could. I joined, first robotics teams. I was on a VEX robotics team in high school, and I was fortunate enough to get into a pretty prestigious college called Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. I was accepted to study robotics engineering, believe it or not. And I always had this interest in it, how robots worked. And it was just always a futuristic concept, I thought. So, I mean, that passion from a really young age is kind of what pushed me to actually want to pursue it as a career and study robotics engineering. And then from working at WPI, learning about robotics, from a really technical standpoint, I realized yes, this is a profession I want to go into in the real world. And then that's when, going into my senior year, that's when a lot of the questions for what are you going to be when you grow up kind of started hitting. And that's where this actually idea for this company, True Robotics, kind of came up. But way from a young age, that's when I started having that passion.
What was really interesting for me preparing for this interview was I see that a lot of times teachers say, oh, kindergarten's too early for me to teach robotics. But that's not what you've just said. Sounds like kindergarten's just about right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's all about the exposure. And if kids aren't exposed to things at a young age, they won't, have any interest in exploring it, later in life, because they might be scared of it. They might not understand it. So, I mean, for me, seeing these technical components when I was in kindergarten or first grade or second grade, then when I actually saw them and learned how they actually worked, I wasn't scared to learn how they worked. You know what I mean? I was more interested in trying to finally figure out how they work. So to your point exactly, I think kindergarten is a perfect time to actually get some exposure started.
Which, of course, is going to lead me to ask you, please tell me the story of creating True Robotics.
Yeah, absolutely. So True Robotics started because I was actually doing some volunteer work during my senior year of college. I was studying robotics engineering, like I said, at WPI, And I was volunteering for this local nonprofit who did like after school programs for students. And they had bought some Lego robot kits and they were running their program, a couple days a week. And I was volunteering, working with the students. And what I noticed was I spent a lot of my time working with the other staff at the site to create curriculums and train them on how to teach the students how to build with Legos and how to make like cool contraptions and robots and things. So I had this idea, like it stemmed upon me, like, what if there was like really solid curriculums and training services that schools or nonprofits could reach out to get trained to become proficient in teaching robotics? So I reached out to some professors at my college, WPI, and I remember I met with two of them and I sat down with them and I was like, I have this idea. They were like, that's great. Like, where's your research? And I was like, what are you talking about? I need to research this. I like this foolproof plan. Like, just trust me. And they're like, yeah, we're not buying it. So I was very fortunate. They actually applied with me and we got into a research program at MIT. And it was called the I-Core program. And it was a very rigorous 4 months. I was a full-time student and I was also in this research program. And we were interviewing people across the country, superintendents, teachers, principals, anyone who was involved in STEM education. And we asked them this research question, like, what are your challenges? Like, what do you struggle with in the classroom? And then from that research and all of that data, we actually interviewed, in the first 4 months, we interviewed 50 people. And then over the next six, we interviewed another 100. So like with 150 data points, we were able to create these things called our classroom packages, which is kind of the bread and butter of True Robotics these days. And these classroom packages include robot kits, they include standard aligned curriculums, and then they also include one-on-one professional development for teachers at schools. That is kind of like how we came up with the idea and started the company.
Let's tempt some people by looking at these robots. And I'm going to suggest in our imagination, we take a walk into a school. We have 3 boxes. Each one is a different robotics package. And we're going into a kindergarten classroom. What do we show them? How do we get the kids involved?
Yeah. So at our kindergarten level, we actually, we have this robot called Treads. Treads is kind of like, a little tank-like. It has like a swivel head with a touch screen that can like make faces. It can drive around. The robot doesn't require any assembly, but that robot, the students can program it, right? So they can, iPads are very common at the kindergarten level. They can connect to the robot via an iPad and then do some icon-based like drag and drop programming, just exposing students to, what a robot is, how the robot connects to the computer, and then how to make it move around all by itself. And then, if we jump up to maybe the elementary school level, right, grades 3 through 5, this is where that box would look like a kit of parts. So now the students are actually building a robot, and that robot we have for that level is called Pilot. And that Pilot robot kit, the students put it together with a screwdriver. They use a wrench. They have to use a ruler to make sure they measure out the distances exactly. And then once that robot is put together and they have built it, then they do a little bit of programming with it. They learn how to make it drive by itself. They learn about sensors. But what's really unique about our platform is that once they have built the robot, have programmed the robot, then they use the robot as a tool to learn math and science. So they practice doing forces and velocity. They practice, density and measuring and things like that, math and science concepts using the robot as like a tool in the classroom. And then jumping up to like a middle school level, that is, our Axle robot kit would be in that third box. And that is kind of like our flagship. It's a much more complicated robot. It has an array of sensors on it to do, cameras and line following and object avoidance. It can be, remotely controlled with like a PlayStation style controller is what they use to program and be able to connect and like drive it around. And then that one, we're really trying to get the students from exposure to mastery, right? We want them to master some of those scientific concepts around how the robots work.
What if some of the students, when they hear math and science, kind of go, ooh, and they're more arts-oriented students? How do you catch their imagination through your robots?
Yeah, I think that's like for any STEM subject, it's a very important point, right? A very unique way, and I think an easy way we have found as educators to do it is by storytelling, is like a really good way, like putting the robot as the centerpiece of a story. Maybe they can use some creativity to design that story around the robot. The robot needs to go complete these tasks. It could be in a warehouse. It could be, doing a dance on a studio floor, right? It can, whatever story that they want to portray that robot is doing is kind of ways that we use to, spruce up the lessons, make them a little more engaging for the students. So it's not just like learning math and science on a whiteboard. They're actually like being tricked into learning math and science by playing with the robot.
What's one of the most fun ways you've seen the light go on for any students where
Yeah.
maybe they didn't know robots could be part of their world before?
Yeah. So I think, an interesting statistic, you can fact check me on this one, but, a majority of schools in the country now do have some type of STEM program, but, less than 20% of schools in America give 100% of their students exposure to robotics. So, as educators, like, while we do talk to a lot of schools that have STEM programs or have like an after school club or something like that, the majority of schools still have not widely accepted robotics as a concept to stick it into a class, into a STEM elective, for a quarter or a semester or something like that. So it's really by pushing that concept, like, hey, look at this really fun, unique way that you can get the students hands-on, but also learning math and science concepts. And to your point, that's why we travel to conferences all across the country. We're always trying to get the word out. Like this podcast is a great way to do that. And, our website, we're just trying to let people know that, like, hey, like if you're struggling in the classroom to get your students engaged, like try robotics. Let's see what happens.
What's been one of your absolute favorite moments from getting a teacher who was saying, maybe I can't do this, I'm not very technical, to, yeah, a robotics enthusiast?
Yeah, so I think it's, believe it or not, there's a teacher in Massachusetts. I'm gonna call her out. Her name's Lisa Katie, and she's a teacher at it's like a medium-sized private school in the state. And she had no previous robotics experience. She was just a sixth, seventh, eighth grade science teacher. And I remember we worked with the principal. Our principal was really excited. They got a grant. They were able to get our program in full capacity. And I remember I showed up to the first training session with her, and she was like, I'm not going to be able to get this programming down. It's like a foreign concept to me. And like she was very concerned because she didn't want to be uncomfortable in front of the kids, right? Because any teacher uncomfortable in front of the kids, right? It's not a good recipe because like then, the students know you're not confident in the material. So then they poke holes in everything. So with that, I remember I sat with her. She built the robot. She did a great job. We went over the lessons. She did a great job. And then she like had confidence to go teach the first couple lessons. And we had another training scheduled for a couple weeks. So she went in and she teach the lessons. And for her, she saw the students love the material, love the robot, love building it. They were, jumping out of their seats. They were like ready to do some math and science the next couple weeks because of how engaged they were. And I remember I went back to that next training session and she was like, holy crap, Anthony, like this is amazing. And her whole mentality shifted. And now 3 years later, like she's one of the best teachers that are using our program because even though she had no experience, she was so scared to do it. She took the like leap of faith, ran through all the trainings, and now like she has 100 students who have been using the program and they absolutely love it.
Anthony explained why True Robotics is unique.
The coolest thing about True Robotics again is just that we really, really, really want that opportunity for all students to get it. When we designed our program, we didn't design it for the top 10 to 20% of students. We designed it for the masses, right? And there's so many programs out there that are amazing for the top 10 to 20%, the kids who are going to MIT already, right? But what I think is unique about us is that we are focused on that other percentage, that 80%, trying to give everyone exposure.
That's an important point too. When you say programming, a lot of people think Java, C#, but this is block programming. You drag and drop the different blocks. I could do that, and I am no programmer. How are you seeing the kids learn to love math? Because a lot of times in school, math is not something arts-oriented kids love.
Yeah, I think that's like a problem across America right now. Like, like even Reading, writing, and math are like the three big pushes across the country right now. And it's all about getting the kids to do it in a fun way, right? Like learning math on a whiteboard, there's always going to be a place in the classroom, like a place in math class for that. But when you're trying to actually see why, like when do I use this in the real world, right? Like that's the number one question. And like just a simple example of this would be when you're using the robots, you calculate speed, right? Well, everyone who's ever learned how to drive drives by a sign that says miles per hour. But most people just know that's a number on a sign and a number on your car, and they have no idea what it actually means, right? So by showing them, like, okay, we're going to calculate the feet per second that this robot drives, and then the next time you're on the highway and you see 60 miles per hour, you actually know what that MPH stood for, right, on that sign. So it's just by, I think, connecting it to real world things and saying like, hey, this is when you're actually going to use this, or if you're going to cook someday, you're actually going to need to know fractions, right? Things like that are what actually get the kids to want to learn how to do the math.
That's so key, I think, is applying to the real world. Let's be sure and mention too that you have some free, I believe you call them mini units, like little modules that if, let's say, a teacher can't quite find the budget this year for robotics, but you still have some resources for them. What do you have there on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So on our website, we have mini units. And mini units are really designed to give teachers and educators like just a little taste, maybe somewhere to go off of, maybe a lesson they could run in front of their principal to show like, hey, we need more of these types of lessons in our school. And these are, very low cost, like $1, like things you would find on Teachers Pay Teachers. Some of them are even free. And what they are meant to do is just be like a quick 45 or 60-minute lesson you could run with the kids. You can use our programming interface for some of them because our programming interface is actually free to use. So anyone could go on our website and be able to program, use our simulator, anything like that, and actually practice simulating programming the robots on our website. It's just like a really good way to give a lot more people just a free resource to be able to get some exposure to the robotics.
Where do they find this again? What's the website?
So the website is www.truerobotics.org. And then if you look for mini units, you'll find all of those free resources right there.
What if a youth leader wants to know more about having you come into their Boys and Girls Club, their Girl Scout troop, their wherever for kids?
Yeah. So if you just go on our website, right on almost every single page on our website, there's a contact form. So you can just reach out to us, name, email. You can also email us at info@truerobotics.org. And then our phone number and all of that is, if you Google us, you'll find all of that as well.
Of course, one real sticking point is that you're going to have to charge for robotics, and not everybody has the budget. How do we get around that? Are there grants or anything?
Yeah, so depending on what state you're in, what type of school or what type of program you are, we've helped, dozens and dozens of schools apply for grants. We've co-written grants with schools. So believe it or not, Dot, we've never had a school not purchase our program because of funding alone, right? It's never the sole reason a school can't do the program. It's usually like we can't afford it and we don't have a teacher to run it, or we can't afford it and we don't have a slot in our STEMs class for it right now. Versus whenever we do find a school and they're like, money is really our only limiting factor, we're always able, even if it takes, a year or 18 months, eventually we're able to find some grants or reach out to community partners and get them some.
We should emphasize that this is never just about selling a robotics kit. You started with supporting educators. It looks as though you get A-pluses on supporting educators all the way through.
Yeah, and that's the point. I mean, right on our website, right? The reason why we do this, right? I mean, like I said, I went to school to become a robotics engineer. I could have made a lot of money, right, if it was all about the money, just being a robotics engineer and climbing the corporate ladder. But instead, I decided to start this company, True Robotics, because what I truly believe is that more students need exposure to this.
If it were 5 years from now, 5 years from now, what
Yeah.
do you want to see True Robotics become?
Yeah, so in 5 years from now, I want to be, I wouldn't say a household name because that'd be a lot, but I would love to be like a school name, right? So like, every school in America has at least heard of us, right? Even if they don't run our program, they might have seen us at a conference, they might know about us because if they know about us and they've talked to somebody from our team, at least someone's told them how important robotics is in the classroom and how great of a tool it can be. And even if they're not running with our program, maybe they're in one of the after school competitions, right? And something like that. So that for me would be an amazing goal to be in 5 years. I know that million student mark. I don't know if 5 years is a realistic timeline. That might be closer to a 7 or 8 year goal, but I want to hit a million students served at some point in my lifetime. So
That is an exciting goal. What would you say is one of the most important things you have learned as somebody with a great background in robotics who's teaching educators about robotics?
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the coolest things is that the students are going to learn so much faster than us now, right? They just pick things up so much quicker than us. And that, like, being with them, watching them learn, it's always like if you can empower those students, right? And you can make them almost become the teachers and help, like, when they teach you something, they remember it forever, right? Like I remember when I was in second grade and I corrected my teacher on a multiplication number and I'll never ever forget that multiplier now, right? Just because it was like she had it wrong. Getting the students to be empowered and taking responsibility and teaching you something is like one of the coolest things to actually impact the students forever.
That is really cool. Final question is the signature question for my podcast. If people can only get one thing from you about innovation, creativity, and making a difference, what would you really like them to take away from the work you're doing with True Robotics?
Yeah, I think I'm actually there's a really famous quote by Robert Frost. It was made famous by a motivational speaker. I think his name was Les Brown. And it's, the world is full of willing people, some willing to work and the rest willing to let them. And I think knowing myself and my personality, I've definitely put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into True Robotics and trying to make it. And to anyone, are you willing to do the work, right? And teach the students to the best of their abilities, or me, like create the best products and programs I can to help students, or go to as many things and outreach as possible. Like, are you willing to do the work, or are you one of those people who is going to watch other people do the work? And I push everyone to be one of those people that does the work.
Anthony, thank you for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Dot.
You and I have been listening to Anthony Galgano, president and founder of Worcester, Massachusetts-based True Robotics. Get a look at True Robotics' 3 robotics kits for their robots Treads, Pilot, and Axle at truerobotics.org. And if you'd like more information for your school or after-school program, feel free to contact them. Also, as Anthony mentioned, you can get a preview of their lessons through their free or low-cost mini units. You'll find these on the Mini Units tab at truerobotics.org. And that concludes this edition of Over Coffee. Thank you for listening. Listen to more Over Coffee podcasts at twomavericks.com. That's 2 TWO Mavericks, Maverix. Be sure you subscribe. It's free by clicking the link on our website. Our music is royalty-free production music provided by Pond5 at pond5.com. I'm Dot Cannon. Here's wishing you a cappuccino day.